This week we are going to be talking about simplifying algebraic expressions. Today we're specifically going to review the order of operations and start simplifying expressions with variables. So before we do any problems together, I want you guys to think about this question. Right? I know we all have different TikTok feeds, but being someone who likes math and someone who is a teacher, I get a lot of education and math related content. And every now and then something like this will pop up where people are fighting in the comments over the correct answer. So I want you to take a second, okay? Try to do this without using your calculator, all right? And I want you to figure out if you think this statement is true or not. Okay, before we talk about this one together and figure out if it's true as a group, I want to review the order of operations. So this may or may not be familiar. This may ring a bell, all right? You might remember the mnemonic. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, okay, to help us remember this order. The reason the order of operations is so important because it tells us when we need to do things, which operations need to come first, which ones are more important, okay? And we always are going to start with our parentheses, okay? Anything inside the parentheses has to be simplified first before we can do anything else. If we have exponents, those come next. Then we have multiplication, and the key word here is or division. Then we have addition or subtraction, okay? Now, the one thing that I know can cause people some issues is when we think about this, when we say it, we say PEMDAS, right? We say parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division. So when we say that right there, we say multiplication before division. So our brain might think that we have to do multiplication before division. But what we actually do is we work left to right in our equation. And if we come across multiplication or division, whichever one we come across first as we work left to right, we're going to do first. And then continuing on. Same thing with addition and subtraction. Even though we say addition first in this ordering, okay, it is of the equal importance with subtraction. Okay, and again, we're just going to work left to right in our statement. Okay, so now that we reviewed the order of operations, I'm going to go back to this question and let's look at it together. So if I think about this, I always want to start with what is inside my parentheses. Okay, so inside my parentheses, I've got 2 plus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy down everything else as is. Okay, and I'm going to simplify that 2 plus 3 to a 5. Okay. Now, when I look at this, I have to decide what comes next, okay? And one misconception people have is they might want to do this. Let me highlight that a little better. They might want to do this right here and simplify here because they see parentheses. But actually, that operation is not parentheses. This is another way of writing multiplication. This is the same thing as saying 4 times 5, okay? And guys, a lot of the times instead of that X, I'm going to use a dot to represent multiplication because later on when we start introducing letters and we use X a lot, I don't want to confuse myself. So I always typically use the dot for multiplication. But I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this with that rewritten. Okay, so I rewritten it without the parentheses. So now I can see that if I think about my order of operations, I've got multiplication and I've got division. Okay, and again, this is where I'm going to work left to right. So I need to do this before I can multiply by 5. So if I think about 100 divided by 4, I'm going to get 25. Okay, and then I can bring down the times 5. Okay. And now I'm at my last step where I've just got this left and I can multiply that together to give me 125. So 125 does not equal 5. So no, they are not correct. Okay. I'm going to show you guys why people were getting 5. Okay, so that way you can avoid this mistake. They were taking this, and I'm going to write it in red because it's wrong. Okay, and they were doing that multiplication of 4 times 5 first. Okay, because, and I'm just going to label this wrong so you guys remember if you look back at this. So they were doing that 4 times 5 first because they saw parentheses. Okay, or maybe they thought that because multiplication comes first in my ordering that they had to do the multiplication first. It could have been either or. So when they did that, this would give them 5. So that is where the 5 is coming from. Okay, so again, just want to make sure that we remember those kind of slight nuances to our order of operations. Okay, so I'm going to go over to our first 2 examples that we're going to do. So if we look at these examples, okay, it's all numbers. Okay. There's no letters yet. That'll be on the next slide. Okay. So all we're doing here is we're going to simplify. Okay, and we want to use what we just kind of talked about with our order of operations. Now we can use our calculators to help us, but I would challenge y'all to try to do as much of this without a calculator as possible, just to kind of get in that mathematical way of thinking and to really challenge yourself. So if I look at this first statement, I'm going to start with, again, my parentheses. So I'm going to start by simplifying this statement right here. So I'm going to rewrite everything else as is, and I'm going to simplify that -3 plus 5, and that gives me a +2. Okay, so from here, if I look at what needs to be simplified next, I see that I have an exponent. Okay, that can be simplified. Now, when you type this in your calculator, if you type it in your calculator, y'all, you need to type it in exactly like this, where you have that -3 wrapped in parentheses and squared, because that's going to tell your calculator to do -3 times -3, okay, which will give us a +9. If you don't wrap it in parentheses, okay, and you type in -3 squared without those parentheses, your calculator will output -9 instead. So it will change the sign. So really making sure that if it's got parentheses on the paper, you put those in your calculator if you use it. Okay, so now if I look at this statement, the next thing that can be simplified, I have multiplication. I don't have division anywhere. Okay, so I only have multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify this, and that gives me +4. Okay, and now I just have addition and subtraction left. Okay, so I'm going to work left to right. So I'm going to start by doing -10 plus 9. So that'll give me a -1 plus 4. And then I've got my last little bit of combining. So -1 plus 4 is going to give me a +3. Okay, so that is number 1. I would love for you guys to try the second one now on your own. Okay, see what you can come up with. Okay, and then I will work it out and go through it with you in a second. Okay, so for this one, there was a little bit of trickiness happening, because not only do I have stuff going on inside the parentheses, right? I have this exponent happening, okay? I have this 3 squared happening inside the parentheses. So I'm actually, before I can simplify my parentheses, I need to simplify that 3 squared. And 3 squared is going to give me 9. I'm going to write everything else as is. Okay, now I can take this inside the parentheses and I can simplify it. So 4 minus 9 is going to give me a -5, and that is cubed. Again, I can write everything else as is. I'm going to worry about that other stuff later. Okay, because I want to move on. Oops. I want to move on and simplify this exponent. Okay, so again, if you type that in your calculator, type it in with the parentheses. Okay, that's going to give us -125. Okay. I'm also, guys, in this same step, you could, if you wanted to, simplify multiple things. We could also simplify this multiplication, okay? Because this exponent, okay, the -5 cubed and the 12 times the -6, those are happening separately from each other, so we could combine them in the same step if we wanted to, okay? So if I wanted to go ahead and simplify that 12 times -6, that would be -72, and then I'm still going to bring down that -5. Okay. And then I can do this simplification. So I know we did it in 2 steps over on that first problem, but you could also just take this whole thing and type it in your calculator exactly like that, or do it in your head, and you will end up getting -202 for your answer. Okay, so that is a review on the order of operations. So we're now going to use this and apply it to some problems that have letters. Okay, so these letters are referred to as variables. That is the official math term for them. Okay, and we are going to simplify these expressions. So when we say simplify, that means we want to get rid of any parentheses that exist. Okay, we want to combine like terms. Okay, so that is kind of the key phrase that you have maybe heard before. So to do that, I need to start by getting rid of my parentheses. So if I think about my parentheses, I have this 5 out in front right here. Okay, and that 5 is being multiplied by the stuff inside the parentheses. So I'm gonna take the 5 and I need to distribute it to both of those pieces. Now that 4y and the 3, okay, we can't combine them because one of those things has a letter and one doesn't. So those can't be combined, so that's why I'm not combining the inside portion of the parentheses. So to get rid of the parentheses, I'm looking at what is outside that then needs to be distributed in. Okay. For my second set of parentheses, it kind of looks like nothing is outside. Okay, but don't let that deceive you because we have this negative sign right here. So we need to put a 1 there. Okay, and then we need to take this -1 and we need to distribute it to both of these terms. So if I do that, I'm going to bring down this 7. 5 times 4 is going to give me a positive 20y. 5 times 3 is going to give me a positive 15. -1 times positive 4 would be -4y. And then this would give me a positive 5. Okay, and that is step 1. Okay, so step 1 again was remove those parentheses. Now I'm looking to combine my like terms. Okay, and if I look, I have a 20y and I have a -4y. So if I think about combining those, I have 20 of something and then I'm taking away 4. So again, use your head, use your calculator. 20 minus 4 is going to give us 16y. And then we've got a positive 7, a positive 15, and a positive 5 that we can combine. And if we add those numbers together, we get plus 27. Okay, and now that is simplified. That is as far as we go here because we have something with a y, something without a y. That's as small as we can make this. So I want you guys to try this next problem. And I do want to give you a hint before you get started. Notice you're going to have to distribute here. So you're going to distribute this -4 and this -2. Okay, but notice we have parentheses inside of parentheses here. Okay, so once you do that distribution, that is still all going to be inside parentheses, and then you're going to have to take this -3 and distribute it. So that's my hint. Try this one, see what you can come up with for your answer. Okay, like I had mentioned, we have parentheses inside of parentheses. So we're going to deal with the inside parentheses first. So if I do that, I get this. I almost forgot to write my T there. Okay. So that is step 1. Okay, I got rid of the parentheses inside the parentheses. Okay, now I'm going to take this -3 and I need to distribute to each piece inside here. Okay, so when I do that, I'm still going to bring down this 8. okay, and then I'm going to have a positive 12t, negative 30, plus 96t, and then minus 72. Okay, and now I'm at the step where I can combine like terms. Okay, so I'm going to start with my terms that have my variable t. So I have a positive 12 and a positive 96. So if I take 12 plus 96, that's going to give me 108t. Okay. And then I've got a positive 8, a negative 30, and a negative 72. So if I combine all of those, that should give me a negative 94. And that should be the answer you got. Okay. If you have any questions about this, please reach out and let me know. Okay. That is the end of the first lecture for week 1.